Hello there, welcome back to Hammer the Backlog. Thank you for coming back to Hammer the Backlog for this video, which is going to be our Year 3 annual planning session and Year 3 Quarter 1 target setting session. You can tell that this is an annual planning session because the table, once again, is suspiciously empty. No models. No one bloody model. So, if this is your first time watching a Hammer the Backlog video, this is an ongoing project in which I, Mick, the one who hammers the backlog, am attempting to paint 30 years of unpainted, mostly Warhammer, but other tabletop wargaming miniatures before the inevitable heat death of the universe. I've been collecting Warhammer miniatures and tabletop wargaming miniatures most of my life. I was going to say most of my adult life, but it's not most of my adult life, it's most of my entire life. But until recently, until I started this project, I didn't really get them painted. What I do is every year I set about a year's worth of models, about 200 models for myself to paint. Then I break that year into quarters, which I put onto baking trays, assuming I haven't forgotten to bring them to the studio. And then I spend each week painting bit by bit up to those targets. So, since the table is obviously bereft of models, we're going to have to throw over to outside broadcast Mick, who's going to report semi-live from the pile of shame itself for us to decide what are the annual targets for year 3. It's a conceit, I already know, but go for it. Thank you very much for that fabulous introduction, Studio Mick. It's outside broadcast Mick, here reporting semi-live from the studio, the other studio, the painting studio. Not much has changed in the last year, so let's have a little poker around the pile of shame before we throw back over to you and set some yearly targets, why don't we? What's on my eye? Just eyebrows. So obviously things have changed a lot in the studio over the last year. The biggest change has been setting up a semi-permanent photography and painting station, which has been a huge success. You can see on this little video here, I'm actually editing you, Studio Mick, as we speak, in a weird kind of snake eating its own tail internet meta moment. Also, I put up some paint racks to bloody keep all my paints together. I'm not super happy with them, they're a little bit saggy. Let's not spend too long looking at them. And let's take a look at the pile of shame. The newly reorganized pile of shame. As I said, not a huge amount of change. We've still got our multiple drawers of unfinished projects. All of these you can see in last year's video. We also, though, have a couple of boxes of finished projects, which is fantastic. We have our big monsters in here. We have our dwarfs and blood bowl in here. We have our dogs of war. All fantastic stuff. Now, let's start digging through the pile and pick a couple of trays for next year. Back to you, Studio Mick. Thank you, Outside Broadcast Mick, for that fascinating and insightful look into the mind of a madman. Having said that, look, we've got 4 baking trays worth of painting projects for a year in front of us. I say this on this video every year on Hammer the Backlog, but this is my absolute favorite part of this project. This is like Christmas time for me. Christmas time comes early in summer once a year. Every single model that I've ever owned, at some point I said to myself, that is the coolest model I've ever seen and I must have it. So getting a chance to go through this backlog and pick out these projects, it's just so exciting. And that's the real key for this project for me. It's refinding the joy in every single one of these models that I had when I bought them, because something about them screamed to me, I'm cool, I'm awesome, buy me and paint me. So in the end, I've done the same thing that I've done the past 2 years in Hammer the Backlog. I've split my projects into about a quarter's worth of painting each. I can paint about 5 infantry-sized figures, 5 Space Marines, 5 Empire Men-at-Arms, 5 Elves, per week. I can do maybe 2 cavalry models, or maybe 2 big monsters like ogres or croxagores. A character model, I usually like to spend a little bit more time on, so I spend a full week on them. So something like a mage or a general might get a full week's work. And something really cool, like a spectacular centerpiece model, like a general on a big spectacular monster, that gets 2 or sometimes even 3 weeks worth of Hammer the Backlog effort. So, with all that said, here are this year's targets. I've divided it, as usual, into about 6 months worth of fantasy and about 6 months worth of sci-fi. Let's start with this tray. So on this tray we have the High Elves from the Island of Blood starter set for Warhammer Fantasy Battles 8th edition. When I got this set, I sadly now traded away the Skaven, so I don't have them, and I can't consider this a full box set this year, sadly. But I am in love with these models. These models come from a time when I was at my peak interest in Warhammer. I went to Games Day, I got lots of High Elves, I had this box set, I went a little bit wild and accumulated about 4,000 points worth of High Elves, one of whom I almost fully painted. So on this set we have 10 Sword Masters, gorgeous close combat models with nice big swords and full scale mail armor. We have 10 Lothern Sea Guard, again another 10 points worth of Hammer the Backlog. These really intimidated me when they came out because of their teals, and I wasn't familiar with how to paint teal back then, but now I'm looking forward to it. The next model is the Mage. He is probably going to be 5 points worth of effort with all of his spectacular effects, which if you saw the last video, you know I'm not actually a huge big fan of. Probably the most exciting and intimidating part of this set is the High Elf Prince on Griffin. An absolutely incredible model, a pivotal model for me in Warhammer model design. The exact perfect size. Before this, probably too small. After this, comically large. Can't wait to paint him. And finally, the 5 Reaver Knights. The 5 of these will probably be 15 points worth of effort, so 3 weeks to paint them. The second fantasy tray is this tray, which weighs an absolute ton. These are the vast majority of my remaining 5th edition metal models. I'm really excited to paint these. For one thing, they are the remnants of my Dogs of War army, so I'll be able to finish my Dogs of War this year if I get them all done. And for the second thing, some of these models are the latest additions to the top of the pile of shame. These 5 Croxagores, for example, were a birthday gift from my lovely lady wife. I'm very excited to get them painted. I'll count them as 2 points worth of effort each. I have the 5 Birdmen of Katraza, slightly awkward fellas who'll need rebasing, obviously, another 10 points. I have a brand new 5th edition metal Slan, which I got when it came out to made to order. I know I broke the cardinal rule of Hammer the Backlog and bought a new model, but does it count if it's also an old model at the same time? You tell me. Don't tell me, because I know the answer, and yeah, I shouldn't have done it, but I did it. The other 5 here are the Brazanga's Besiegers. This will be the 4th time these models have been painted, and this is going to be the last time. Also behind them we have the 5 members of Vespero's Vendetta, the Duelists. And last but not least for this quarter, this tray, is Golfag's Ogres, one of my first ever purchased units of Warhammer. Way too big a project, way too complicated. Bits are missing, heads, arms, these are going to be a lot of work. On the sci-fi side of things, we have Deathwatch Overkill. So, this tray here is a very simple tray. This is the Gene Stealer cult side of Deathwatch Overkill. A lot of models here. I think it's something like 46 models, and some of them much more detailed than others. All of them much more detailed than the 5th edition fantasy models. There will be no extra projects going on while this tray is being painted, let me tell you. We have a couple of Pure Stain Gene Stealers, we have some Abominations, we have all of the cultists themselves. I love the look of this set. This is the set that introduced or reintroduced Gene Stealer cultists back into Warhammer 40k. I was super excited to get these when they came out, and now they're finally going to get done. The final tray is a little bit of a weird one. Because I want to get Deathwatch Overkill painted this year, that leaves 13 Space Marine models to paint. But 13 Space Marine models does not a quarter make, unless I painted each Space Marine to the best of my abilities and spent a week on each of them. But in my opinion, that will probably drive me mad. So the kind of plan I have for this tray is that I'm going to paint each of the Space Marines to about 3 points worth of effort, and then that leaves me 20 points left over, which I'm going to spend on 2 lovely plastic fantasy units. I have a unit of High Elf Phoenix Guard that I'd love to paint, and I have this converted unit of the Reichland Company of Honor, I think, which I built for Warhammer Fantasy, based on my absolute favourite Warhammer Fantasy book of all time, The Uniforms and Heraldry of the Empire. So what I'll probably do with that tray is paint a Space Marine and 2 infantry models per week. So let's define the targets for the year for year 3. Target 1, get Deathwatch Overkill painted, photographed and online. Target 2, get the High Elf Island of Blood starter set kits painted, photographed and online. Target 3, get my 5th edition metal models finished, painted, photographed and online. So those are all of the painting targets for year 3. I'm super excited to get started on them. But as you know, Hammer the Backlog is not just about painting. I also like to do some meta targets, some stuff outside of simply getting things painted. This year, I'm going to focus on doing stuff that I really enjoyed doing in the last 2 years. One of my favorite things to do last year was the Tlaxclan Battle Report, where I had my 5th edition Bretonnians facing off against Jim's slimy lizard men. So the meta target, or one of the meta targets for this year, is to get a follow-up 5th edition battle report played, filmed, edited and uploaded. And since this is a big part of the Hammer the Backlog project, documenting all of my sets, if you saw last week's video where I finished off the Dark Vengeance set from 2012, you'll know that I have a full set of Dark Angels and Chaos Space Marines. Luckily, in that 2012 set, there actually was a starter scenario to play through. So the second meta project for the year 3 of Hammer the Backlog, yes, that's right, will be to get the Dark Vengeance Let's Play video, or series of videos, played, filmed, edited, and uploaded. So those are the year 3 targets, broadly speaking. Now we have to do quarter 1. So year 3, quarter 1. Which trays and which meta targets am I going to do? I don't know if this is going to come as a surprise this year, because I certainly wasn't sure which one I was going to go for, but in the end, I've decided Thunk! I've decided that the year 3 quarter 1 painting targets will be to get my 5th edition Warhammer Fantasy metal models painted, photographed, repaired and online. We have about 50 Hammer the Backlog points worth of models here. We have 10 points for the Croxagore, 10 points for the Ogres, 15 points I think for the Slan Mage Priest and his bodyguard, 10 points for the Birdmen, 5 points for the Crossbowmen and 5 points for the Duelists. That leaves me 2 weeks to play with, which is fabulous because I'm planning on going on a lovely little honeymoon this year. But I'm really looking forward to getting started on these. I have a real love of 5th edition metal models that's just grown inexorably over the last 2 years. And if we're being totally honest, one of the greatest things about getting this tray done this quarter will be knocking the top off the pile of shame. Most of the models that have been added to the pile of shame over the last year are here on this tray. So that will stop them climbing down the list and being forgotten about. But I like to have a painting target and a meta target every quarter. So the meta target for this quarter is going to be to get the Dark Vengeance Let's Play video played and filmed. You'll notice I haven't said edited and uploaded this time. That's because with me taking a little holiday to go on a lovely little honeymoon this quarter, I'm not entirely sure I'll have the full amount of time needed to get it actually edited, finished and uploaded, especially if the painting gets tight. And if it comes down to a choice between the painting target and the meta target, the painting target always wins, because that is, in fact, the entire point of the Hammer the Backlog project. If I can get it filmed, edited, uploaded and live on YouTube before the end of the quarter, I'll consider that a bonus, but it's not the target. So thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you for joining me on this journey of painting these years and years and years and years of accumulated models. I am still thoroughly enjoying myself. I'm really seeing the benefits now of following this system of productivity and accountability. If it's something that you're interested in, this is the absolute best time to get started. Join me, why not, in setting yourself a year's target for the next year. The actual number of models that you decide to paint is borderline irrelevant. I am not the world's fastest painter. This tray of metal models here that's going to take me 3 months, some painters could knock this out over a weekend. Some painters could spend the rest of their lives painting this many models. Doesn't matter how many models I'm actually painting. What matters is I'm setting a standard and a pace that I'm comfortable with, that I enjoy keeping to. That's so key. I actually have to enjoy this, or else what's the point? And you can do the same thing. You could set yourself a year's target, break it into quarters, and follow along with me over the next year. If that's something you're interested in, drop a comment down below in the description. If you'd like to keep up with Hammer the Backlog, you can watch some of the videos leading up to this by clicking on some of the little linky dinkies that have been appearing through this video. You can also subscribe. Liking and commenting on the video seems to be the best thing that you can do to feed the ever-hungry YouTube algorithm. If you're interested in this project-based style of painting and management, then follow the blog at www.hammerthebacklog.com. I go much more in depth every week there into the weekly targets, the scorecard, the progress. It's a much more in-depth look at the processes. On the other hand, if you don't care about any of this project management stuff and all you're interested in is seeing the shiny models, you can also follow Hammer the Backlog on hammer_the_backlog on Instagram. I will see you again in 3 months' time when we will be looking at all of these models fully painted up and beautifully coloured on their goblin green bases. But thank you very much for watching this video. You probably watch it all because you're one of the best eggs. See ya. I'm out of here.